Programming Throwdown, episode 140, Developer Burnout and Infrastructure as Code with Ronak Rahman. Take it away, Patrick.
Welcome, everybody. Another exciting episode today. We're very excited with our guest here, Ronak, talking about two topics. Now, I watch some reality TV. I know I'm shameful, you're not supposed to say that. And I watch that Top Chef, and they always fuss, don't try to do two dishes because you're going to screw one of them up. Hopefully that won't be us today. We're going to do two topics that are going to be pretty interesting. I'm excited. The first one, super relevant to everyone, developer burnout, but then also infrastructure as code, how they relate, what it is. I think this is going to be a pretty awesome, jam-packed episode. Welcome to the show, Ronak.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here talking about topics that are interesting to me. And also, thank you, Patrick, for the cooking reference. I love cooking shows.
Okay. We can't get sidetracked there.
The forming chocolate sculptures one, I forgot what it was called, but that was my favorite.
The French company. Okay.
Yes, it was the French, and the amazing things they could do with the chocolate. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
Oh dear. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely going to get sidetracked, and I'm going to be hungry. It's almost lunchtime here. I'm distracted now. Ronak is developer relations manager at Quali, and we traditionally start out the show, Ronak, by just sort of talking about how people got into tech and their kind of story, how they ended up where they are. So why don't you talk maybe do you remember what your first computer was or your first experience and sort of where did you kind of build that passion?
First of all, I want to say again, thank you for having me. I mean, think about the extreme privilege that I'm enjoying. I'm talking about something I care about, and you guys are asking me these questions. And you want to listen. I think this is all the human experience is about, wanting to be heard and listen. Yeah, I totally remember what got me into technology. And I'm hoping somebody on listening to this podcast will remember it. But my old man was an engineer, and they were learning this cool thing called Fortran back in his days in the 70s. And I mean, it was cutting edge, right? And to train the engineers, they had them, and I think I found this on eBay still, they're like green and white manuals. It's like a really skinny, flexible manual, and it's striped green and white in the front, and it's learning Fortran. And it basically looked like a math book on the inside. And I was 7 years old where I pulled these down I'm not kidding. I pulled them off because I was so bored. I was looking for more to read. And I read it, and it looked just like math problems. So I started doing it and started writing out the exercises and whatever. And my dad came home from work, and he was like, who wrote in my manuals? And by the way, this is right. Did you do this? He didn't at first do this, and him being an Indian dad, not very impressed easily. The typical joke there is they give 99.9% approval, so you're always chasing that 0.1%. But he gave full approval then, and that sparked it. That I was done. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to program. I'm going to create the next awesome. Yeah. So that's how I got started.
That's a great story. Wow. I mean, I think there's a story there about parenting and about the balance between giving approval, but also sometimes asking more of your kids and trying to make sure that they know that they got to push themselves. That's something as being a parent, I won't get in that side topic either, but I mean, that's a struggle. So, I mean, that's awesome that it worked out that time. That's really cool.
Yeah, that. And also, I guess, since you brought up parenting and whatnot, I should put a plug in for, sometimes things work, like with parenting, and apparently it worked out in this case, but also don't be afraid to seek the mental help that you may or may not need due to that parenting style. So, work on yourself. And that's great because we're talking about developer burnout, another stress-related issue. So I think that'll tie really nicely in with what we're talking about and solving those potentially deep wounds from our childhood.
So, okay. All right. I mean, wanting to talk about developer burnout, I mean, everyone has that. I mean, this is something, we were talking a little bit before the show. You're very passionate about, you think a lot about. I think that's awesome. Important to talk about. Maybe how you kind of that first experience, obviously growing up, kind of where did you get, what was your kind of programming journey, your tech journey, however that kind of went from there. And then, kind of first starting to encounter this dreaded burnout.
I love it. And I have a really good story on how that started. And I have to be careful not to mention any business names. Okay, so yeah, here we go. All right, so let's see if our listeners can decode what I'm saying. My first.
So he was at Blueberry. It started at Blueberry. No, just kidding.
It's. There is a big software creator in the Pacific Northwest, and I was a young developer working there. And the rumor has it that burnout is a model built in to that corporate culture. But I was young and hungry, and thought this was the best thing that ever happened to me job wise. And I was eager to do it, so I had no problem pulling in the 12-hour work days, and it was amazing, right? The first time, out of college, and these big buildings, working on problems that were important. Anyways, I was leaving one night after just 2 months of doing this, and I made friends with the security guard, who actually decided to chew the fat with me and walk to the parking lot with me, the parking structure. And I asked the security guard, "Hey, what's up with that Prius in the corner?" And I think anybody from this time period will know this story. And there was just this Prius gathering dust, had all flat tires, totally covered in dust. And the security guard told me, "Well, that's actually a person who's been working here for a year now, hasn't left, and he got a call from his now ex-girlfriend saying to come and pick his stuff up because he no longer lives there." And his stuff in the Pacific Northwest was just sitting outside, soaking in the rain. And he discovered that he no longer has a life there. And he just brought his car back and parked it there and just stayed working.
Wait, we got to double click on this. So where does this person sleep? I mean, how does this work functionally?
Okay, let me tell you, all the things that end up contributing to developer burnout actually seemed really cool at the beginning. And I'll give an example. Like my kid, my 14-year-old loves his smartphone. We just gave it to him. But all of us adults know that smartphone is like the work of the devil, right? And you try to hide it away from you as much as possible. So I thought it was cool as a young software developer that there is kitchens filled with large industrial refrigerators full of all the food you can want. I would just open my backpack and just put them all in because super poor. And they had massage chairs and quiet rooms, and we all did have our important office. I think you're getting, Jason, the answer to this question is that developer slept in his office. And by the way, that was totally okay. Yeah.
Wow, that is wild.
Yeah, I feel it's worth giving some context there. That, I mean, people have heard the stories about other companies, and yeah, like you mentioned, free food, free meals. They're also often, I mean, maybe you don't know this. I was explaining to someone in my family, this is a thing. I made a joke about staying in the office. I didn't, but I made a joke. Hey, I could just live there. And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, there are showers because people bike in. And so there are showers. You could shower. You could have stuff. You have an office or a quiet room where you could easily nap at night when no one's there. And there are stories, both probably real and not so real, of people, just living in the office and it not being the worst thing. Like people kind of go, yeah, I could see doing that. Makes a sense. And especially when you couple it with how expensive it is in a lot of these places to live, now you say you can actually justify it, right? It's not that the person is broken, it's that they're smart. And they're smart because they've killed their commute. They don't have to do it anymore. They don't have to pay for a home. And you can actually begin to like put this person on a pedestal. And the same happens with now the thing is people getting those big vans, the conversion vans, and parking them in the parking lot. Oh, I don't live in the office. I travel around in my van, but it's there when you leave and it's there when you get back.
I want to just kind of key in on, what Patrick was saying though. That shook me. It was a rumor seeing that car and people, but the actual, parking lot, the security guard, the attendant, telling me that story and confirming it. And, I don't know if it's true because I never met the gentleman, but it was a compelling enough, it was real enough. I could see the burnout in my group, and it actually scared me. And that was, about 20 years ago. And I sort of took it as a cautionary, like a scared straight type of tale. I did not want to be like that. I didn't want to work so hard on something that, I didn't care whether all my stuff was sitting outside getting right. I mean, I didn't want to be like that. And that's what started me on this path thinking, in fact, I was lucky. I had an experience early on in my career. Instead of, like the lobster slowly boiling in the water and not realizing that they're in harm, I had a quick shock, and I started looking for signs of this. And you could see it in the interview when they interview, if they ever call their team a family. I think, come on, us being in IT, we know what family means. We're going to get a call for every computer problem that the family has. So I kind of look out for those keywords, and I've been trying to avoid it. So first step in the Maslow's hierarchy is survival, but next I'm privileged enough and I work for people good enough. How do I help others?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some, we could kind of take it from both sides. I think you're already mentioning kind of recognizing the signs. And I actually really liked that you, in some ways, made it an analogy to a cell phone, where I think the belief that it's a strictly positive or negative thing, I don't want to say it's a naive belief, but the black and white part of it is not, I know where you were going, but I think the companies, I don't know that they intend to make it a trap, but they don't not intend to do it either. Oh, see, there they got the double negative going.
No, you're awesome. I love that, actually. Yeah.
And so I think, like, there's a story about, video game developers, and they're working hard to push out, before the deadline. And there's people install bunk beds because, hey, we're just going to crash here, and at least we have a place to sleep. Management realizes the problem. What's the solution? The solution is take away the bunk beds. And it's like, well, wait a minute, right? And so, I don't want to demonize the companies completely yet. Not make them free.
Well, and that's not productive too. We are. I'm not here to like deep dive into or create like a sort of political social justice moment here, but there's things that we can do, like understanding both ends of the equation, and let's try to understand that corporate position. All right, we are here to make money, in the our salary isn't a charity type of thing. It's a trade-off, our time for them to get a product. Now, I think both sides have a room to understand the other. Sometimes in blindly chasing profits and features and the next thing, we sometimes don't know about like the long-term costs. And I'm here to talk about, and we're going to get into IAC here in a sec. I'm here to talk about how it is in corporations' interest to sort of, I want to say nip this in the bud, but to address developer burnout, because at the end of the day, and I want to speak the language to our corporate system, is that we need to address this so that we can be more profitable and that we have a better long-term outlook. Turning over one skilled employee, forget about the morale. It just doesn't make business sense. It costs so much to onboard and make a, in my field, a lot of times, especially like say things like consultant or implementation engineer or public facing technologist, it can take up to a year to make them productive. That's very expensive. We can do things to address developer burnout, and I kind of wanted to talk about some of that. I don't want to veer too far, but I have hope that we can use technology to fulfill some of that promise on both sides.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think one of the things related to burnout that's shocked me was how different disciplines have different ways that they get burned out. So, for example, if you're in sales, you're on the phone a lot, and so if your manager calls you to give you some immediate feedback, that's actually a great thing. I mean, most people love to get feedback. They don't get enough of it. And when they get, a call from their manager, just impromptu, hey, I was in that call with you 5 minutes ago and I think you did a great job. That is just net positive, right? But engineers really value their sort of flow time, their sort of individual kind of focus time. And so that's an example where, a manager who isn't in tune with developers, might just randomly pick up the phone and call a developer and say, hey, you did a great job. And they don't realize that now it's going to take 30 minutes to get back that context, to get back into that code. And so there's a lot of pitfalls like that when you're managing developers that people aren't aware of.
I love that, actually. I love what Jason just said because, and let's talk about even lots of people like being managed differently, sales versus development, and even how we get feedback. Yes, I'm more, as you guys can probably tell, I'm more of a people person, but not a lot of my colleagues are. And, picking up that phone call from manager might be, in addition to, as mentioned, the context switching, which is, by the way, just incredibly annoying to context switch. But it might also be, increase my social anxiety. I don't want to have this conversation with, but that's not to say developers don't like feedback. And so we have in development most software gets created through what's known as a CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous deployment, or as I like to call it, everything. The idea is software should be built like 5 minutes ago. Right? They just want you to think it, have it coded, and then appear out in the world as continuous deployment. All right, that's where we're getting to. And to do that, a developer needs feedback, constant feedback, but they want it in channels they can subscribe to. Right? Like maybe I have a Slack integration or I have an email that the build delivers and I get that feedback. I can choose when to get that feedback, and it's not human. So it's predictable, it's a predictable piece of feedback versus a lot of times I'm maybe a more introverted person and that social interaction through a phone call, that saps me out. There's something called spoon theory too. And some people only have a certain amount of spoons they can give to social interaction. And we should be mindful of that too, especially in the developer community. Folks are going into this not because they want to, be people facing a lot of times,
Yeah, I think recognizing and various companies try to give various trainings on like recognizing that there are different folks. But in practice, it's something that I think you just always have to work at, that empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes and realizing the way you view the world isn't necessarily universally subscribed to. And I mean, even today, I don't want to get into the like politics in the workplace, and we've seen a lot of people pushing for either more or less. And I mean, I think just there's a lot of stuff that happens at work, and add that to your personal life, like we saw during COVID, where now like not only is there people being worried, people are being different kinds of worried, people are having different ways they want to talk about how they want to deal with being worried and about the problem, right? And it's just all this stuff swirls, and you end up with this, hey, I have someone on video in my house, and my house used to be the place where it wasn't work, right? And some people have this work is work and, not work is not work. Other people have a more blurry line. And I think that, sometimes through, intentional or unintentional processes, those lines blur. And you were kind of mentioning, some things to deal with it. But for me, what I'll say is I think having in your mind, like, what is work and what is work to you, and having it be defined is one of those critical things where it's okay if you want to work at some place because you believe it's changing the world and it's the only thing that matters. But be very clear to yourself that that's your relationship. If it's just a paycheck, be clear to yourself that it's just a paycheck, right? Like in your own mind, at least, be clear your relationship to this job. Because if you don't, you end up with this murky, like, what is the right thing to tell your boss when they call you on the weekend? Or if, you get a text message at 3 a.m. and get fussed at and you didn't respond to it. And so, you got to have that sort of like delineation clear in your mind.
Isn't that weird? It's like what you're describing too is, being clear. When you're talking about being clear on that, I mean, basically we're talking about boundary setting. And there's two parts. Like we started this podcast out on not villainizing any one group. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're going to realize it's like, I mean, we're not so far apart, the developers and the management. We're not far apart. We actually have the same goal, believe it or not. Like developers, they absolutely 100%, they're going into the work and they want, no developer says like, oh, I want to accomplish less today. No, that it's very important that they accomplish the thing that they accomplish. And it's just that it becomes, so developer burnout, I feel, is a fancy term for any type of burnout. And that burnout is, you have burnout when you're in a situation and you're unable to manage the stress in that situation. And then that accumulates over a time, and then you have something burnout. Sorry if I'm explaining this and everybody has the same idea, but I just wanted to start off as that baseline. And I wanted to talk about something I'm hopeful about. So far we've been talking about bad and whatnot, but things have improved, right? I mean, the pandemic has been terrible, but it has given us opportunities, for instance, to increase our remote productivity, right? Zoom and all the connectivity there. And I wanted to talk about, if it's okay, something that's helpful that I see as for the first time, we're now at the place in our CI/CD pipeline is the pipeline that software gets built in. And, I've been at a couple of DevOps conferences where, some folks say the CI/CD pipeline is the meeting place for all interested it's like the meeting place where we have to communicate with each other. Developers are now forced. It's like where the rubber meets the road, where I finished a feature. Management says, okay, where's that feature? It's going to happen through that CI/CD pipeline. That's where we're like sort of saying it's okay to communicate versus picking up the phone. And within that pipeline, an activity that happens is when you develop software, it has to be deployed somewhere. And that deployment place is called, it's infrastructure. And in more general, it's called an environment. That is like, I think Star Trek, the final frontier of automation, or not final frontier, but it's the next frontier of automation within that pipeline. And why do we care about that automation is because it's less tedious crap that I have to do. And leading the way for the first time, we have the popularization, and we couldn't do this before, but we have something called infrastructure as code. Okay, people like Terraform, folks like Helm charts, for instance. We're taking the tedium of standing up a server, and you can see where this trend has gone. At first, I remember when I was a young IT engineer that we would rack and stack servers, and we would have a cold room with raised floors, right? I was working at a large gas firm at a large oil company in Houston, Texas, not hard to imagine. And we had cold rooms on every floor, of the building. And I walked into a cold room with a team where we were supposed to do some wiring and rack up a new test environment. This is how hard it was. It would take weeks to get an environment, which is just, a group of servers in together and wired and put in the right subnet and whatever. All of that was manual. And we go to, you know how you lift the raised floor tiles under it? It's with suction cups, right? Have you seen those suction cups?
Well, you got to probably explain to people what cold rooms are. Like, I mean, I know what it is. I've been in them, but there are probably so many people out there who are like, what are you talking about? A refrigerator?
You're so right. So a cold room is, before you had your cloud and your Amazon, everybody would have, I feel like a grandfather explaining this to like back in my days. I totally am.
You totally
like,
are, but
okay,
it's good.
So
go for it.
Back in the old days, what you do is, instead of cloud, you would have a server room, which is all the cloud is, right? It's like a giant server room, and people are taking bits of those technology. But back in the day, everybody had their own like lab room where all of these servers were being underutilized and set up into environments that you could connect to before somebody had the good idea of, oh, let's put these in a common location and serve them out as a cloud. So you'd have your own personal cold room, which is just servers and racking and cooling all in one place for you to access compute power. We didn't call it then. We said, hey, we need a server in the lab. So you raise the floor, because a lot of times you put these in old buildings, and it's to allow cooling and all the wiring to go under.
And it literally is cold. They blow like extra air conditioning in it because the servers get hot and they don't want them to overheat.
Yeah, go in with a jacket type of thing, right? And I took suction cups and I did lift the panel on the floor that we were going through, and we found curled up a contractor asleep. Yes,
No.
we found a contractor. Now, I'm not a narc, but this is a definite situation that's not tenable or safe. This was reported, and
No.
we never saw that contractor again. But some people address developer burnout in different ways, I guess.
But you never saw him again, but you always felt like he was there, just underfoot.
It was a creepy. I'm so glad. That's fun.
Yeah, do you have all the tiles now? Whenever you go in, you got to put like clear ones in.
I try to never be in a cold room anymore. It's kind of like one of those things, like from your early on in your career. It's like, oh yeah, I'm never doing that again. But yes, now I'm always afraid. Okay. So sorry, gentlemen, I got off track. Thank you. So we have now something. So that I was describing the dinosaur days, right? What I want to describe now is we've come to where nobody has a cold room in their office. They use Amazon or Azure or whatever. They're a cloud service, right? And it used to be you can create these infrastructure components through like the GUI, but nobody does that anymore either. They provision out systems through code. And a lot of these cloud providers have their own language. But what's cool about like something like Terraform is they're cloud agnostic, meaning I can code up, I can say stand up a Tomcat server, stand up a load balancer, stand up a database in this one script, and I can point it to AWS or Azure or whatever, and my assets will appear after I run this script, right? Doesn't that sound like a miracle? Yeah, it sounds like now I don't have to do anything to get this, server. I don't have to rack it. I don't have to provision it. I don't have to go to a GUI to do it. And it's all within command line tools. And I'm arguing that things like that can remove, probably folks that are listening right now have had trouble with an environment. They need an environment to deploy their software. They're ready to go. The corporate managers and leadership are saying, this is great. And we're realizing right now that the bottleneck is somewhere to install that software. So infrastructure as code gets us one step closer to the promised land of where I don't have to worry about that. Immediately after building my code, so current process is check out code from like a source control, right? Onto your build server. That's a well understood pattern. You build the code into bits that you can deploy, also well understood, very well mature. You save the bits onto an artifact repository, which is a binary repository similar to source control, but stores a version of your software. That's well understood. And automation deployment is also well understood. We get it from that common place, the artifact repository, and install in our systems. What we're still in the baby nascent phase of is having that environment codified to be consistent and to be on demand and ready. And infrastructure as code is that next thing I'm super excited about that really is going to help developers not sit around and wait ever for that. We can find the next bottleneck, So yeah, that's it. We can go as deep as you want there. So let's talk.
Today's sponsor is Mergify. Mergify is a tool for GitHub that prioritizes, queues, automatically merges, comments, rebases, updates, labels, backports, closes, and assigns your pull requests. Mergify features allow you to automate what you would normally do manually. You can secure your code using a merge queue, automatically merge it, and many more features. By saving time, you and your team can focus on projects that matter. Mergify can coordinate with any CI and is fully integrated into GitHub. They have a startup program that could give your company a 12-month credit to leverage Mergify. That's up to $21,000 of value. Start saving time. Visit Mergify.com to sign up for a demo and get started, or just follow the link in the show notes. Back to the episode. I have some questions, but I guess, so to kind of bridge that back, what I hear you kind of calling out is, and I've observed this across many tasks, is that the last thing you want to do, and we talked about context switching in that, is you're ready to go do something, you hit compile, and then, 10 minutes later, when you've awkwardly, like, I don't know what to do, check Slack, whatever, your code comes back, oh, you have a typo. You're like, oh crap, you're like trying to figure out whatever, right? And so that when you have those friction points, then it kills more than just the time lost. So if I hear what you're saying is infrastructure as code is in part to do this, that like you get ready to go deploy, and then there's these tasks that need to be done to make sure that in exactly the same way. So not only is it a tedious task, it's a task that needs to be done accurately, precisely, repeatably. And if you have a human do that, they're going to be context switched out, they're going to be frustrated, and you're going to lead into those problems that just take them out of their comfort zone, out of their flow, right? And like put them into doing this task. And so this infrastructure at code, you're sort of describing as helping solve that process, to help like kind of go in and address it.
I love so much that recap of what I just said, Patrick. It's like it was a complete like a lob, a total softball. I mean, because that allows. So now I get to take the other side, like the leadership management side. If you think about it, I love. I don't know if you in the audience picked this up, but Patrick said one really cool thing is not only is this a tedious job that you have to do, and it's done manually a lot of times, but it has to be absolutely bulletproof, repeatable, just as it was. That statement that I made screams of automation, and it screams. And when you hear that something has to be done reliably, fast, and 100% of the time done the same way, you think scripting. And when you don't do scripting, you've identified a task that is going to wear down a developer's soul. Oh, and one more thing I want to say about that is we're assuming that the developer has the necessary skills to build that infrastructure. But that's the rub. We're putting things on the developer that are not their responsibility. Is the environment hardened? Do they have a security opening? Did they conform to their corporate standards in getting the subnet correctly on? These things, you're paying a fully baked rate for a developer to figuring out something that they there's a skills gap there. If we could somehow, what IAC does, it does another thing for leadership. It's taking there's a position typically held by a cloud architect that is responsible for those environments to be created properly, but they number in the few. And to make their skills scalable, if you put infrastructure as code, they can review scripts and not thousands of individual environments that they would have on a backlog. So it's like a double win for both the developer and the leadership. And it's and what infrastructure as code also sets the leadership up for is taking more stuff off the developer's plate. For instance, as a developer, I'm trying to get code out. I shouldn't care about the cloud bill, but to my developers that are listening on the call, on the podcast, you have that at the end of the month. The manager comes up and says, why did my costs spike suddenly? And then comes the activity of trying to figure that out. That kills me. I don't care. That's your job to figure out. I just write code.
Yeah, that may actually not be like obvious to people how that works, but at a lot of large companies, and the ones that do end up having someone need to kind of basically review the bill, because what they found out is if you don't hold them accountable, the bill will just skyrocket. And so having been through companies going through that transition. And so when you're going in and using a cloud service, internal, external, like you're not paying that bill. It's getting billed to your company, right? But it's getting billed to some portion of your company, and it's getting rolled up and rolled down, and all that stuff happens, and you're just using it. But then someone in your management chain will get an email at the end of the month or end of the week saying, hey, here's how much you used. Here's how much it's increased. Here's how much of year over year. I'm not telling you to make it go down, but I'm telling you, you should pay attention to it.
I mean, at the very minimum, Patrick, it has context switched me. I have to now answer this question. I have to investigate. But what IAC sort of gets us, infrastructure as code gets us, is there is, it doesn't get us all the way there, but right now, I now have automation creating my infrastructure. Now, if your infrastructure is being created by automation, I can put in things called like tags, and I can guarantee that they will show up on my Amazon bill or my Azure bill or my GCP, my Google Cloud Compute bill. Now that's not 100%, and I'm going to take a second just to plug, the company that I work for, Quali Torque. Quali has a product called Torque, and we're a control plane, sort of over that. So, and all I'm calling out here with this plug is IAC isn't all the way there. You need a process to manage, just like code stored in Git isn't all the way there. You need something to sort of act as a control plane and manage that. That's what GitHub is to Git repos. You need something over, IAC scripts, Terraform scripts floating around in your corporation. That's not going to help you. If somebody reuses that script with your tags on it, you'll get billed for that stuff, even though you're on another project. And so what we thought of is, what's the next step to make this problem go away and to satisfy both leadership and line working developers? And that's it. It's the control plane that says, I have a list of Terraform scripts or Helm scripts here. We divided up access to different applications, and you can provision all you want in a self-service way. And I can only touch the scripts that I care about, and it auto tags and auto does all that. So now as a developer, I get the environment that I want, and I never have to worry about costs. I never have to worry whether it meets corporate standards, because the scripts have been signed off on and now are made available for reuse. And I don't have to worry about permissions. I, as a developer working on application A, will only be able to see certain scripts. And that's what really I'm trying to sort of nudge us towards. Like, let's stop making this a problem. Let's automate it. Let's give leadership the information they need, and developers the ability to just, their fully baked cost is incredible. We want to trust them. If we don't trust them, that's more of an employee HR problem, right? Let's stop snooping on them. Let's stop micromanaging them. Let's give them the tools that satisfy leadership's valid need for control and compliance and security, with the ability to self-service develop. That's the holy grail, right?
Maybe I'll express my naivete here. Okay, I definitely will. I have no idea what's going on. So what I'm understanding in the flow is, if I'm a developer and I'm trying to stand up some infrastructure and I can write these scripts, you mentioned this Terraform Helm script. I'm not sure the difference, but there are these two ones. And then the idea being that, like, when we stand it up, we want to associate that the things that we're bringing up are able to be grouped later, so you can analyze them. So you have these tags, so you put on it, you bring your stuff up. I imagine you're saying how many of a thing you want. Like, I need X number of processors. I want, X amount of, I don't know, bandwidth, or an Nginx, proxy in front that's going to do this. Is this the level? Am I kind of...
You totally got it. I did want to add one more thing. So we talked about the grouping logically, and we talked about doing that in tags. But another thing that the scripts a lot of times just on their own don't kind of address, it's the life cycle of infrastructure. A lot of these were just meant, hey, I gotta stand this up fast. But one of the ways that costs increase in the workplace for cloud costs is, I forgot to kill an environment. Isn't that the dreaded one? Well, here with a control plane, and one of the things that we did was we took scripts and we say there is a lifetime. You set the lifetime at the beginning, and then it's guaranteed whatever assets were created by the control plane will be, at that time when it's expired, it'll be killed. There's no, I went over on the weekend and I left a very expensive perf environment up. There's none of that. So now, not only did I not have to worry about cost, but I can also confidently As an application team developer, I can confidently say I am reducing costs without it being a burden to me. It'll just die on its own in the time that I set. And I have the receipts to prove it.
Nice. Okay, so I see this. This is addressing, we have this, I mentioned this summary page comes out. Management's like, hey, what's this thing that's been running for this long? Does anyone know who owns it? We email around the team like, hey, who has this AWS instance running? Like, does anyone know what it is? Is it safe to take down? Like, we could take it down, but we don't know. Is it like serving some critical role? And like, it's going to. So what you're saying here is like, not just, it helps with that as well. Not just like, hey, this is expensive and running, but where did it come from? How did it get there? Who deployed it? I mean, are you getting that kind of like provenance information as well?
Yes, 100%. And also I mentioned compliance and like, okay, we started talking about developer burnout and IAC, and those are sexy topics. I'm about to talk about something super unsexy. Ready? Compliance. I can just sort of picture all the folks listening. It's like, yeah, that is pretty unsexy.
Tell us why though. I think actually a lot of people are going to be like personally, I've never run into compliance issues. So I don't want to talk about it because it sounds horrible, but I actually have no idea like what does it actually be.
Yeah, I mean, compliance for me just it sounds like a person with a suit who has like two sort of pockets in his lapel, and he's got the left pocket for left ear Q-tips and the right pocket for right ear Q-tips, and never the two shall mix. One of these type of things,
Okay, so let's talk about compliance. All right. Folks on listening might remember there's a lot of times software is built by taking public open source pieces of software like Log4j and whatnot. And recently we've heard about some very public, not mentioning any names, but very public, very embarrassing security breaches made. And then when they root caused it, it was simply none of their software had a problem. It was software that they brought in that they depend on, such as a vulnerability in an older version of, like, say, Log4j or something that's very popular and used by many. Compliance is making sure none of that happens. In the olden days, it would be somebody, we would have a BOM. It was called a BOM, BOM, a BOM list for software. Like, oh, these are everything. And it was shrink wrap software, right? It was like a CD, of, oh, here are all the files. And in the good old days, I could just check off all of these. It's like, oh, I know where this came from, whatever. And it's burned on CD for life, and it's no problem, right? Things have gotten much more complicated in a connected, open source, commercializing open source items type of world. And so this is super important. And some of my colleagues in, like, for instance, we have a partner, JFrog makes one of the most popular artifact repositories there, and they offer that's so popular that they offer scanning all your binaries for you and whatnot to see if you have any of those problematic dependencies. But the point here is the compliance is real. It's not going away. And if you go to any DevOps conference, what they're going to talk about, they're constantly, just like everything gets cheaper when you push it upstream in the development process, like in the thinking and the coding part. They're going to start, and they're calling it DevSecOps. They're pushing security up the food chain. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know jack about security. Okay. I need tools that are going to help me do this, and I don't really want to. And that's one of the things that we encode to. You have a cloud architect responsible for this. They're going to make sure your Terraform scripts or your Helm scripts are correct, and you're scanning all the pieces and the infrastructure meets the requirements. And so then we publish it as a card, in a catalog. But this is your infrastructure. Super cool app number 1, infrastructure for QA or whatever. And when you have those cards and run it, you'll know compliance is done, and you've therefore remove the bottleneck of your cloud architect's time. You don't need to hire multiple of them. It's just one person scanning all the scripts. And you've also taken away the developer having to worry about this. And third, leadership is happy because now, you have stability, you have compliance, and that all helps you make money. It's confidence that your software is not broken and you're not going to have an embarrassing, public incident.
So the control plane and bringing it in, what you're accomplishing here is tying even more pieces together and allowing them to be sort of like viewed all at the same time, because as you're mentioning, all these things are somewhat disparate, like security, compliance, this, that. And what you need is a common place where, as you said, it's management. You want to be able to go and know what's happening. And as a developer, you don't want to care. You just want to say, like, I didn't get my stuff out. And so what you're trying to do is sort of aggregate all those things together, put them in a common place so that they can really just, I hate that word synergy, but they can all just sort of like combine together.
Let's use it.
No. I always get fussed at when I use it as a being a shill. But, you bring it together and, just sort of like, it makes more sense to have them always, like you mentioned, I mean, GitHub, right? Git was not, in my opinion, it was cool, but you had your own version control, your own peer review process, bringing it all into one place and adding, the syntax correction suggestions and the peer review comments and the automated Jenkins test results, and right, putting it in one place.
The pull request mechanism in one common place. I was going to respond, but I think Patrick said it all, and I just want him to come work with me too, because he said it better than I could. Let's just like deep dive into that statement. Control plane is nothing new. Okay, like a control plane, you can find it in technical literature all the way back into the 70s. What is new is like, and I don't know if anybody else in my company likes this, but I like comparing it to GitHub. On the face of it, you think to yourself, oh, GitHub doesn't sound like that complicated of a piece of software, right? It's just a web page that's displaying repos in a common location. Anybody could have done this, but I think people are missing the point. It was a need. It was a need to centralize a decentralized sort of structure. And here we're on the precipice of that very same need. You have DevOps as a movement where you're sort of freeing developers and operation folks to do things how they want to. But when folks do things how they want to, there has to at some point be, and usually leadership plays this role, like a true north to get all of the cats herded in the same direction, right? And that's what GitHub does. And I love GitHub for it because it's going to make my job a little bit easier. We're trying to do that with infrastructure. And by the way, this isn't even a new concept. We talk about GitHub, but another place that is a control plane like that is Artifactory, for example, for binaries. It's a common place where people are addressing what version of their binary do they have? Did it scan and meet compliance? Is there, they publish reports, permissions of who can download that. And we've done this all along the way. And I mean, folks who are into predicting the future, like check out how easy it is to see where the future is going. We had code stored in a distributed version control system, Git, and now we have GitHub. We had binary stored internally, and now we have Artifactory being a control plane over that. And now we have the need for infrastructure to stop being a bottleneck. And we're going to see that there is a need for that control plane. One place for it all, one place where leadership can guarantee its audits, team development leaders can determine who has permissions to these assets. And finally, we're talking about the developers and avoiding burnout. I don't ever have to open up a DevOps ticket to get my QA environment. By the way, let's talk about that. When we do this manually and when we throw this on DevOps to provision us an environment, I would love to get feedback from the audience. How many times in your life has that ever worked the first time it was presented back? DevOps ticket comes back. It's like, oh, you're done. Does it work? I can't even SSH into it. Forget about it. So it is going to be iterative. You're going to have to do it. And I would love to hear back from people if there's a ticket needed to open up, to start an environment. I'm thinking it's going to be at least a week before you get an environment. Prove me wrong, is what I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, it all makes sense. So, I mean, I think we set it up pretty good. I want to make sure we take your time. So tell us a little bit about so you were kind of mentioning, I mean, I think we got the hint here, but where is Quali trying to come in here and help? And what are they doing to kind of try to address this need that you're pointing out?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. So I have been hinting at it, and it is all about the control plane. But let me just I'll start off sort of with the corporate line, and then I'll just sort of drill into, where I'm most passionate about. But yeah, we're fulfilling that, like that GitHub and that Artifactory sort of control plane for infrastructure. And there are the pillars that we talked about, right? So there's self-service for your developers. There's a role-based access controls. That's for development and leadership and DevOps team. There's auditability and cost control, all things that leadership care about. And we're trying to put that in we've put that in one place, and we're looking for folks to, come tell us what their experience is with that. I'm hoping it'll be transformed. Okay, now here's where it's the aspirational. This is Ronak talking about this. I'm hoping that this basically is indistinguishable. Quali's torque control plane is indistinguishable from infrastructure as code, the same way as GitHub and Git are almost indistinguishable. Some people say, yeah, I'm using GitHub, or I have a GitHub repo. It's like, well, it's a Git repo that's being hosted, over there in GitHub. And I want people to make that same sort of that same mistake, because I'm convinced that, in addition to it benefiting, my chosen place of work, I believe this is actually something that's going to help benefit people. And if they feel different, or if they don't see what they want, here's an opportunity to sort of direct that. And I want folks who participate and use this control plane to think how this is going to make their life better. Because if it's going to make their life better, it's going to probably make all of our users' lives better. And this is like one way. And it's kind of like tuning up a car. It's like, all right, I tuned up a car, I put a turbo in, and it's like, I'm going to find the next part that needs help, right? Let's nail infrastructure as code, and let's move on to the next problem.
Nice. So Quali has built out this torque, this control plane. They're, trying to help with this stuff. I mean, you're there, obviously. Like, you think this is a worthwhile thing. Tell us maybe a little bit about Quali as a company, how to work for it. Like, do you feel, are they giving their developers a chance to avoid burnout? Not trying to set you up, but
it's one of the things I discovered. It's sort of how I came upon that realization that I don't like lying, because that's too much to remember. So I like working for places where I don't have to parse myself. It gets me in trouble sometimes, but I work for places that are, sort of like mine, that fold in with my worldview. And I personally, so first of all, location. Quali is located in the beautiful, sunny Austin, Texas. You can't go wrong with that, in the domain area. So, just super cool place to be. We're working on something that matters, I think, and if you take a look inside and you feel that this matters to you too, come talk to us. And we really, if you look at our company history, we are trying to solve this problem, and it's almost inextricably I can't say that word. Tied in with developer burn. I really tried. I tried to say that word. I couldn't.
Inextricably?
Yes. Thank you. I just
it's okay. It happens. It's Monday.
it's so Monday. Come check us out. There are ways to, feedback is important. If you don't want to work for us, you're like, oh, that's a little too much commitment. Try it. Try out torque. And, do you guys remember the old discount tire commercials? If you don't like your tires, come tell us how it feels. And you see an old lady throw a tire through the glass. Come throw a tire through our glass pane.
Not literally, please.
Well, okay, yeah, I guess not literally. I don't want to incite any riots. Yeah, that's it. Oh, and personally, I would love to. And this is just the personal part of me. I want to hear about your experience, and I know where that next place, after we nail this problem, it's going to be continuous testing. We're gonna have to address that too. So you have a future. This is just like tuning up a car. We're just going to find the next place that needs it, and once we have it all under the umbrella of a control plane, we're going to give folks the framework to address all these future problems as well.
I mean, it sounds awesome. I mean, I think for people trying it out, do you guys have like a free plan, a way for people to try Torque, a website that they can go to?
100%. It is, portal.quali.io. qtorque.io/join. And there's a free tier that you can sign up for, and think about it, and it's free. And I was very adamant that, it should be free because I fully believe in, like, giving something of value if I expect to get something. And I would love to I ask for feedback.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think, definitely check it out. We'll have the link in the show notes. And this has been a really awesome, we covered a lot of ground. I feel like probably a lot of questions, people are going to be left like, wow, that was a whirlwind tour of infrastructure as code. I feel burned out listening to it. No, please, hopefully you're not burned out listening to it. I mean, I think, a lot of these things, and it helps us start early. I guess it goes without saying, but, realizing there's an issue both when you're problem solving for building a company or a tool or software, but also burnout. I mean, being really attentive to the direction something is headed and making sure that, you manage technical debt or, personal debt, like making sure that, you're really on top of the ball would be a parting admonition I would give people, I guess.
Well, thank you so much for having me over. Have me back over, and we can go even meta. We can start talking about, okay, when you start getting rid of this burnout, what are you going to do as a developer or as a tech worker? What are you going to do to actualize that true self? What are you going to do to make this place better?
Write code on personal time.
We could, or how about this? How about we can, every library has, rooms that you can like reserve. Why not host like a STEM night and pass on some of your coding skills? Just even showing a kid how to use Git, you'll find new ways for kids to hate you in the area.
Yeah, so. Actually, you completely killed it at the end. I was not ready for that. I'll say that I think that's really important. And you mentioned this several times, like, we're really privileged for a lot of reasons. I mean, talking about burnout, I think of, I see sometimes people driving around where I live, there's lots of construction. I see people out working in the heat. And I think about like, oh my gosh, like my burnout is an entirely different beast than, hauling around 2x4s in the, hot summer day. So I think we're privileged. And I think you shared a story, Ronak, about your father being an engineer and sort of like having those books available, answering questions. I'd say my father was an engineer, but there are many kids out there that like have the mindset, but they don't have they don't have a book on the bookshelf for them to discover. They don't have someone to come up and point the flaws in their Fortran code they wrote on paper or break it, right? Like they don't have, be nice. But like, I think this is a great point, like trying to help those and bring folks in who just, we get sometimes for the podcast where people write us, hey, you helped me get into tech. I mean, now we've been doing it long enough. Some of those people are already like well into their careers now. And it really helps you feel that sense of, like you said, giving back, really finding someone to kind of pass the baton to.
And when someone tells you that, Patrick, doesn't it just make your day? And that's what we're talking about in this podcast. We talked about developer burnout, and that's kind of like I'm equating it in my mind. That's kind of like, oh, okay, I am helping somebody at a car accident, right? And here, addressing developer burnout is more like I have applied a tourniquet to somebody, okay, to stop the bleeding. But we're going to need more help. We're going to need actual help at the scene here. But that's okay. We're going to survive, and we're going to do it together. And then you're going to, be it months from now or a year from now, we're going to talk about the next phase to that actualization and making things better. And I thank you guys for the extreme privilege it was to talk with you.
Well, thank you everyone for listening in again, and we'll see you next time.
Music by Eric Barndollar.
Programming Throwdown is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 2.0 license. You're free to share, copy, distribute, transmit the work, to remix, adapt the work, but you must provide attribution to Patrick and I, and share alike in kind.